Reggie here, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. In this video, we are going to take a look at a couple of comics that you potentially want to avoid buying. This is not a criticism of the books per se, but it's really about trying to time your purchase to avoid paying more than you actually should for a comic that you really want. Now, with that said, I am going to be a little critical of one book in particular that I think is actually overpriced. I'm going to explain why I think that that is the case, and then ultimately you'll be able to decide what is in your best interest. With that said, let's get to the video. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of comics, and the very first one is up on screen now. This is Amazing Spider-Man issue number 78, the first appearance of Prowler, who is Miles Morales' uncle. It is also the first appearance of Hobie Brown, who goes on to become Spider-Punk. First appearance of two characters that are attached to an incredibly popular movie. So I think the reason why this book should not be purchased right now is pretty apparent, because its value potentially is higher than it otherwise would be if the movie were not out there and selling all kinds of tickets. But a great book from 1969 here. John Romita is behind this one in terms of pencils. The script was by Stan Lee. There are not a lot of copies of this book on the census, and it's interesting. There are only 1,700 total copies across all labels. 1,600 of those roughly are blue labels, but you also don't see a ton in the way of recent sales data for, the 9.8 all the way down to the 9.2. But when you start to look at where there is 30-day average data in this last column over here on the left-hand side, let me make that maybe a little bit bigger so folks can actually see it. You can generally see that the 30-day average is higher than the 90-day average and also higher than the 1-year average. Again, the value of this book may be getting pushed up because of the excitement of the movie. So you can see here the 30-day average for a 9.0 is $709 versus $706. Here you can see the 8.5 501 30-day versus the 90-day average at 463, and again higher than the 1 year. Here 405 versus 338 versus 318. Not so, it's not holding here for the 7.0. You can actually see that the 30-day average is actually lower than both the 90 and the 1 year. But again, generally speaking, those numbers are increasing as you get closer to the near term. Not a ton of just sales in general because of the low census count. So it makes it a little hard in some cases to see what's happening with these books. But let's go ahead and glance at the 9.0 ever so quickly to see how this book is performing. I want to actually take that off. So you can see here that the most recent average sale for this book was basically $709.21. If you back up, you could see that in January, this book was going for basically $600. So it's increased about $100 or so from January to where we are in June, to over about 6 months. The high watermarks for this book was $880 back in 2022, and also $910 back in 2019. And I think, and you guys may have to fact check me on this, I think that the original Miles Morales movie came out in 18. So you saw a little bit of a run up in the post period for this book where it reached that high watermark of $910. But look at what happened after that. In the time period after that, that book dropped. If it dropped from, where was it? High water of 910 down to, if I can get the cursor, 175 by November of 2019 is basically where the book was. And it kind of languished there, if you will, until about 2020, when everything exploded. Everything exploded with this book, or with the market, and it jumped back up to another another high water mark at 880. So I feel like, again, that this book is a good book. There aren't a ton of them on the census, but I feel like the value of this one is being pushed up by the popularity of the movie. And so we could see a fall off on this book after a cooling off period after the movie comes out and kind of washes out of people's system. Down here, there was a recent sale for this book, and you can see here that it was a best offer. They put it up there for $7.95. That book actually sold for $7.25 when I went to go look at it. So again, the trend, the upward trend is holding, at least with the most recent sale. Let's look at one other example here. This is the 8.5, little less expensive book here, but again, you can kind of see the same thing play out here, where the book, was at a high water mark. When was this? In September 21 of 860. And it dropped off to a low in April of 23, down to $312. And now it is back up to $483. Again, I think that if people, hold, this book's value will come down. Like so many other books, after the movie comes out, we could see the value of this one drop down to a more normal level that makes it a great opportunity to actually pick this comic up. All right. So that was the first book that I want to look at. The next one that I want to glance at is one that I'm going to be a little more critical of. I'm going to be a little more critical of this one, but it is also a book that is attached to the Spider-Man movie, the Miles Morales movie. This is Edge of SpiderVerse issue number 2. This is the first appearance of Gwen Stacy as Spider-Woman, and that is an important distinction to make. It is not the first appearance of Gwen Stacy as a character. She appeared in the original Amazing Spider-Man run, but this iteration of her from the multiverse as Spider-Woman was in Edge of SpiderVerse issue number 2. A great book, a really cool cover. But this book, which was released in 2014, has challenges. This book has challenges, and I want to first focus on the data before I get to some of the other potential more controversial things. There are in total 7,400 copies of this comic out there across all of the labels. There are 6,600, almost 6,700 of them that are universal blue label. Now, when you look here at the census count for the 9.8, there are 3,300 copies that are a 9.8. That is a lot of books. That is a lot of books. And as you look down the census count here for at least CGC, you can see that the census count drops off big time as you go down. A lot of these books are a 9.8, and you can see the 9.8 has a fair market value of $1,150. You can see what it's done at the 1 year versus the 3 versus the 90 day versus the 30 day. But I think, again, if you look at the data here, 50% of the books are blue label, are 9.8. That is a lot. The 9.8 is not exactly a rare flower. And that's part of the reason why I am struggling with this book, because there's so many copies of it out there. And so I feel like if you're buying this book for the purpose of investment or, having value, the 9.8 is your only way to go, right? But the challenge is that potentially that value right now is a little inflated because of the movie. And so it potentially isn't a good time to actually pick this book up. You can see the book had a high water mark of 1924 in 2021. It also had a high water mark in, where was that? April of $2,000. And right now it is sitting at about $1,100. So generally speaking, it's not a terrible price versus where it's been, but is it maybe priced a little too high based upon the movie hype? I would say yes. Is it a $2,000 book? Is it $1,000 book given the census count? I don't know. I still think that even at $1,100, even at $1,000, I feel like because that census count is so high, this book is a little expensive. I personally might want to own the original Gwen Stacy book, right? The original from the ASM run. That potentially is a better book in my mind, but you guys will have to decide for yourselves what you want to do with this one. The other thing that I'll point out is that there is some controversy surrounding this book right now, and it is not so much the book. It is not so much the character. It is people's interpretation of the character because of the Sony movie that came out. And if Sony and Marvel happen to lean into what is happening right now, I feel like that could have a detrimental impact on the value of this comic. And do I know that for a fact? No, I do not. No, I do not, but it's important for me to flag some of these things for people so that they have, the information that they need to make informed decisions. And again, this is not to take anything away from this version of Gwen Stacy. It's not to take anything away from the book, because the book is solid. People absolutely love this character. It is more about making sure that people have some awareness of some things that are out there. And again, it comes down to the timing, right? It's the timing. Do you buy now? Do you wait to see how things are going to unfold before you invest $1,100, $1,000 into a comic? That is for you all to decide. So let's take a look at another book. This is another book that I think is having its value impacted by what is happening in the world, specifically the fact that there's a movie that is coming out later this month featuring the Transformers. And this is the first issue in the series of arguably one of the better cartoons from the 80s. I absolutely love this book. I absolutely love the cartoon. This book was published in 1984. It is the first appearance of a lot of great Transformers here. A Bill Sienkiewicz cover. You cannot go wrong. You cannot go wrong with this one. So let's zoom into this one. So there are 5,600 copies, blue labels of this out there. There are 6,200 copies total across all of the labels. And again, I will tell you, I have some slightly mixed feelings about this book, because in some cases it could be a good pickup. In other cases, other grades, maybe not so much. You guys will have to decide where you're going to aim, what makes sense for you. Is this one that you actually want to pick up? So let's look at the 9.8. Again, contrasting this to the one that we just looked at with Edge of Spider-Verse 2, there are only 615 9.8s out there. Only 615 9.8s out there. And print runs in the 80s were not exactly small, right? This is a little bit more of a rare book. A little bit more, right? Not rare, a little bit more of a rare book. 615 copies at a 9.8. Not a ton of them changing hands. Well, maybe 287 of them changing hands. This book has an FMV, according to Go Collect, 1550. Not a whole lot in the way of sales for this one, but I do in the 30-day. But I do want to look at this one. And I want to look at the graph here. Like, let's look at the graph right now. This book has a average price of $13.75, right? It was as low as $12.54 at the end of December. I think that was the most recent low price. Yeah, it had a high watermark of $2,800 back in 2021, which is a ridiculous amount of money. And if we look back at 2020, this book was going for $1,200. So roughly right now, this book is not too far off of where it was back in 2020 before the massive run up. So it's like this question of, is this a book that is really a $1,200 book? 615 of them on the census, arguably one of the more popular cartoons, action figures, comics, potentially even from the 80s. Is this a $1,200 book? Or is this book overpriced? The fact that the value isn't higher and there is a movie that is coming out right now might signal to some that this is a good time to pick this book up. You would almost expect this book to look a little bit more like what we are maybe seeing back here, given that the movie is coming out. Maybe we'll see an uptick if the movie comes out and the movie is actually good. Maybe the fact that it's where it is right now is a reflection of people not believing that the movie is going to be good. It's a confounding book in so many different ways. And I just wanted to kind of flag that for folks. Let's look at one more. Well, maybe two more. Let's look at the 9.6. 9.6 has more in the way of census. There are 1,100 copies of this. 488 of them have traded hands in recent days. The value of this one is not nearly where the 9.8 is. And as you look at this one, you can actually see that there has been an uptick, right? This book back in November 2022 was $282. As of right now, June, this book has an average cost or average value of $400. So there has been a little bit of an uptick, right? The book was in May $339, and now June June, it is $400. So a little bit of an uptick. And is that being fueled by the fact that the movie is coming out? Is it being fueled by the fact that this book is not terribly expensive? It's hard to know, but back up. Let's look at the high water mark, right? High water mark 602, the one before that 656. So again, in comparison, the price is not terrible. It's not $1,000, it's $400. And so again, it's a little confounding. It's a little confounding as to maybe what folks should do here. Let's look at the 9.4. The 9.4, I think, is even more. Yeah, that one's just kind of sputtering along. $168, $169 is where it is in June. It is just kind of sputtering along down there, looking kind of sort of attractive, right? Depending upon what you might want to do and why you're picking the book up. So a little bit of some confounding type of findings there with that book. And again, it may go back to what the reason behind why you are picking this book up, right? Are you picking it up because you're a fan? Are you picking it up because of money? What might be your motivation? At the end of the day, those are things that you guys are going to have to decide. Now, with that said, we're going to wrap this video up. I want to thank you all for taking the time to watch. I hope that you enjoyed this look at books that potentially you should not buy. And again, this is not necessarily criticism of these books because I think that the books are awesome. It's a question of timing. With that said, it might also be a good time for you to pick up a copy of Isolation. We have several different packages available on SpiderPublishing.com. Isolation is a fantastic comic that I am working on with my buddy Doug Bratton and some graduates from the Kubert School. If you are interested, head over to SpiderPublishing.com today and pick yourself up something nice. If you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.
This thing on? Mic check. I just want to make sure y'all can hear me clearly. Yo, should you practice art? Or should art be your practice? I had a question, so I asked it. Not to anyone specifically, but to my inner God, you know? The one that's gonna be a master. The one that's more than a rapper. The one that's an educator. The one that seeks enlightenment. He travels with concepts. He's got the mindset expansive. He understands that his time combined with travel and concepts makes his mind convex. Sort of like when you look at a brain scan. Straight off meditation, we was concaving until we had that eternal dialogue that created our dialect. Now we in distinct rooms of pure souls having them conversations. Synergy and combinations. You fly and we waiting. Indian style and the gold.